Welcome to Perspectives On, where we're giving the world a voice. We are a faith-based social justice forum where individuals give their perspectives on various topics. It's an opportunity to express their viewpoint, their stance, and their angle on justice issues affecting the community and globally. Each episode features guests presenting their perspective on things like climate change, the church, urban farming, and food insecurity, all through a unique faith lens. Come check us out. Give us your perspective. Welcome to Perspectives On, where we're giving the world a voice. I am Lairalaine White, and I am your host. So, despite looking towards a different presidency that will combat climate change, there's still strife in the world of climate activism relative to what is important in climate crisis, such as where do we begin, and most importantly, if it will be a job creator or a job creator. Climate activists all over supporting themselves the next administration's moves of action against climate change. In fact, according to CNBC, President-elect Joe Biden is trying to take steps in climate change by rejoining the Paris Agreement. Sources from his camp are boasting a $2 trillion budget with the goal of shifting the economy to green energy and green jobs. So today, we will continue to expand our conversation on the various approaches that the new presidential administration should enlist to tackle this crisis. And we'll talk about the potential jobs that we may see in the future. To help build this dialogue, I have invited some gifted and knowledgeable members of the climate reality movement, and they are joining me on behalf and on behalf of all climate reality leaders everywhere to talk about this very important subject. So, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We start with Keira. Why don't we start with you? Introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do and who you are. Go ahead.
So, hi, my name is Keira Lee, and I run an organization known as Climate Improve. I educate people, primarily youth, on the extent of the climate crisis and what they can do about it. I'm always updating the website for new information. I just updated it now, and I'm hoping to make more progress with this organization.
Awesome. Revdele, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about you and your initiatives?
Okay. Well, peace and blessings, everyone. I'm Revdele. I'm a grandmother, a pastor, and a spiritual leader whose mission is to train the next generation of climate resilience leaders. And I have a couple of national initiatives that are doing that. Soil and Souls is a national cooperative network focused on training 18 to 35-year-olds in resilience in their local communities. Our goal is to have 30 resilience hubs around the country, and we are moving in that direction. I also write books. I've written a couple of Bible studies on climate change, and also I'm writing a new children's book on sojourner truth and nature, because that's one of my initiatives, is to bring the voice of Mother Nature to the center of the environmental movement.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And thank all of you for being a part of this dialogue tonight. I'm sure you bring a lot, as my viewers will find out, you bring a lot of information and awareness to this issue. We're going to start with talking about, it's been a hot topic. President Biden has been very vocal about his position on climate change. As I said in the intro, he has already announced plans to rejoin the Paris Agreement with a hefty $2 trillion budget, just to try to shift the economy from the use of fossil fuels to clean energy and green jobs. But what exactly is the Paris Agreement? And we really need to, I think from my view, we may need to define what the Paris Agreement is. Anybody?
I can take a stab at it.
Go ahead, go ahead.
My name is Harjeet and I'm a biologist, a scientist by profession, and I'm going to try to sum up the Paris Agreement in a few words. It is actually a landmark agreement that was arrived at by 197 nations that are parties to the United Nations Convention on Climate Change. So this agreement was arrived at in December 2015, and it went into effect in November 2016 after several countries had ratified this agreement. And the goal of this agreement is to combat climate change aggressively by accelerating climate action and investments that are needed for a low carbon future. So the main aim of the Paris Agreement is to ensure that the increasing global temperature does not go beyond 2 degrees centigrade by the end of this century. And preferably, it should not go above 1.5 degrees centigrade. And the second aim of the Paris Agreement is to provide funds and financial assistance to the developing nations so that they can accelerate their climate change commitments. And each nation will put forth best efforts to and these are called the nationally determined contributions towards reaching that goal. And so how can we as a planet reach that goal, or 197 parties to this Paris Agreement? What do we need to do? What we need to do is to reduce the global greenhouse gas emissions by half by 2030 and to net zero by 2050. So that's a very ambitious plan, but it seems that the Paris Agreement really doesn't go far enough. And even if everybody did meet their targets, the temperature might still be higher than the projected 2 degrees centigrade by the end of the century. And unfortunately, United States withdrew from the Paris Agreement in 2019, which came into effect in November 2020. So it's time for our new administration to go back and rejoin the Paris Agreement.
Yes, and I'm so glad to hear President-elect Biden put it at the forefront of his agenda to address the climate crisis. Anybody else have anything to say about defining the Paris Agreement?
Yes, definitely. I think the Paris Agreement is very effective, but we're not quite there yet. It's a very slow process to transition back. So we are going to need more than just the Paris Agreement. However, we shouldn't get too hopeful just yet, because it takes a lot more than just the president to change things with that.
I think that's the point of the Paris Agreement. I think it's acknowledging that no one country can do any of this on their own. It acknowledges that we have a lot of corporate interests that must be changed in order for the climate to reverse itself. And I think that's really the hope, is that maybe with peer pressure, with positive peer pressure, we can create new economic models so that our economy does not depend on destroying the earth. And I think that's really where we have to really get to where the rubber meets the road. I think we have some more hopeful ideas if we really stay earth-based in our solutions and in our focus.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the next piece, and I like what you said, Reverend, about not allowing the not allowing the hype, or to make sure that the hype is directed appropriately. I think that's a better way of putting it. That with a little bit of peer pressure, hopefully we can sway the trend in favor of, and I think we're going to talk about the Green New Deal and all the tenants that it represents. As I said earlier, a lot of people are against it because they feel like it's going to be a job buster. But before we get into the Green New Deal, let's talk about, as Afra mentioned in the CNBC article that that was published earlier in the month, a college student majoring in business explained her future career choice. She knows one thing: she wants to make money. She wants, and the reason why she wants to make money, well, the wealthy feel the effects of climate change less. A phenomenon which has become especially evident during the pandemic. It's a lot easier to live in this world if you have money because you will be able to move through the crisis with a little bit more ease. Does her statement speak to you, or how does her statement speak to you? And is there any truth behind it? What do y'all think?
Okay, I'll jump out there. I think that her statement, it shows an attitude. It's a testimony to the problem. It's a testimony to the climate problem. It shows that we have a culture based on greed and that we do not have life at the center of our needs. A person going through college ought to be looking at how can they use their God-given gifts to restore, to redeem the earth, to make this a more abundant place for everyone to live. And that doesn't seem to be a value that is in this person's statement. I think that it's unfortunate that wealthy people can temporarily avoid some of the discomfort, but trust me, as we continue to destroy more and more of the earth, the wealthy will not escape. When I did my Katrina response work, I was on the ground, I did a radio broadcast, and the wealthy, the powerful, everyone was in a mess. Okay, it didn't matter how much money you had if everyone was underwater. If everyone is on the rooftops, it doesn't matter. And I don't think that we need to have a culture that is so focused on wealth that we're willing to destroy our life support system.
Okay.
I agree. I couldn't agree more with Reverend Dele. I don't think it is an either-or situation where you can have wealth and insulate yourself from climate problems. And if you don't have wealth, you are going to suffer. We've seen in California how very wealthy people lost their lives, because of the wildfires. And it's been going on for several years. So all of us need to get involved in the climate action, especially the young people should not try to hide from climate change, and they should tackle it upfront by pushing their local representatives for climate action, for policies that will include everyone in a green economy. So yes, while it is true that if you have wealth, you can temporarily protect yourself, you can have better insurance, you can recover from loss quickly, you can live in part of the country where climate change is less of an issue, but in the long run, each and every one of us will be affected by climate, and so we need to fix the problem.
I can definitely agree with that. I do think, though, I definitely agree with your statement, is that if you're wealthier, you're living in an area that's less prone to the climate crisis, at least it's less prone to the effects. If you don't have as much money, you're kind of just left with an area that's more prone to the effects. And you may also not have enough money to get technology to adapt. I do agree that it affects all of us, humankind in general, though you just feel the effects less if you're wealthier.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people would also I think the statement speaks to a lot of people who are being disproportionately affected by the climate crisis. We have communities where they are predominantly persons of color and a large African American contingency. living in communities where there is a lot of what we call environmental injustice or environmental racism is occurring. And most of these communities are communities where they are a percentage below the poverty level. The average household or the household per capita is less than $20,000 a year. And so in these communities, we find that the community infrastructure is often not as it should be. There's not a lot of fair and equal housing. There are things that are affecting the environment in these communities because of the lack of resources uh, that are going into maintaining the community. And so these communities that I'm speaking of, these are the communities where they are poor, they are below poverty level, they are experiencing a high degree of a climate crisis. And so I'm just looking at it from that perspective, where that young lady wrote that statement. She's like, okay, well, I want to make sure I have some money so that I can go live in a cleaner community where I can go live where the infrastructure is a lot stronger. And I don't have to live in a community where the persons that are in that community are being disproportionately affected by environmental racism. So that is pretty much how what that statement speaks to me about. And it is true. I do agree that there are, environmental racism is not just in communities of color, but it's all over. But it's disproportionately affecting those communities where people of color are.
I'd like to add to that, Dr. White, that the NAACP did a study entitled "Cold Blooded" several years ago, where they looked at communities of color and their proximity to toxic waste sites. And what they found is that African Americans of any income level were more likely to be located next to toxic sites. So it didn't really matter. African Americans were not able to use wealth to escape environmental degradation. And so I think, it's a both and situation. Yes, primarily the poor suffer disproportionately, and people of color of any wealth could not escape even right now.
Especially right now during the pandemic. But in regular time, right. But this statement is definitely speaking to what's going on right now. You're absolutely right, Reverend. And then in a previous show on we discussed some of the components. I can't stop talking about the Green New Deal. But in a previous show concerning climate change, we discussed the components of the Green New Deal, one of which actually will actually be a job creator rather than a job destroyer. What are some? Does anybody have any information on various jobs that are available to those who want to combat this change? And what are some of the resources that will be available as this Green New Deal goes into effect?
Well, I think that we're hoping that the USDA will, again, step up their food security measures and become more fair in the way that they distribute support to farmers, so that farmers of color can have the support that other farmers have had for generations. And I think we're looking at the evolution of new industries. Landscaping is actually a very easy entry profession that all of our communities would benefit from, because if we were to restore our neighborhoods back to their original ecosystems, we would immediately see the air being purified, and we would immediately see health disparities turned around because that your environment wasn't stored. I'm also part of an initiative here in upstate New York that's looking at hempcrete as a substitute for concrete and as a substitute building material. And what that will do, actually, that even if we were to step up the manufacturing of hempcrete, we would see a reduction in sea level rise, because one of the reasons we are seeing the sea level rise is that we're excavating sand, millions of tons of sand, to build the human environment, to build our freeways, to build our buildings. We're literally, raking the bottom of the ocean out, and that's why the sea is raising up. So there's some really simple things that we can do on a massive level that will make a big difference right away.
That's correct. That's right. Right.
And I think as more and more green energy is created, there will be really very well-paid jobs in the green sector. There will also be jobs in the infrastructure development, retrofitting old buildings or upgrading roads and bridges. And I want to add, because I'm a biologist, I want to say that we need to go and restore our damaged ecosystems, which have been very badly damaged by how we humans have treated nature. So ecosystem restoration for those who are interested in biology as a profession would be a great place for finding jobs in the future. And then in environmental engineering, hopefully all these components, they belong to the the Green New Deal. And as more and more of these components are implemented, there will be more green jobs for the young people.
That's right.
Yes. And while most people may think that, the Green New Deal may take away jobs like working in oil and coal and all that, but instead, new jobs will replace that, like jobs in solar and in wind that will be even better for the economy. It will help the future Gen Z people as well as older people. The jobs will be for everyone. And these jobs will help mitigate climate change, but it will also open new jobs to help adapt to climate change, like being a firefighter or even an entrepreneur to develop new technologies so that us as a society can adapt to the effects of climate change.
Absolutely.
I resonate with all of that. I think that the biggest destruction of habitat is right under our feet. We have 70 million acres of lawn here in the United States alone. And so if we want to restore ecosystems, let's start in our own backyard. Let's start in our neighborhoods. Let's start in our cities. And we can use a New Deal, just like they had the New Deal in the 30s, where they put lots of people to work doing restoration things in people's neighborhoods. We can do the same thing now, and that will make an immediate difference. I think if every yard, if all of those 70 million acres of lawn were restored back to their original God-given design that regenerates itself and is abundant, does not require fertilization, does not require watering, we can, within a year, we would see a difference. I don't want us to forget that during the pandemic, in 30 days around the world, we saw clear skies that people had not seen for generations.
That's right.
Okay, so what we have to remember is, just like there is an accelerating component while nature is spinning out of control right now, if we get our act together and we start putting things back into God's original design, nature will also de-escalate at that same exponential level. And we can see a reversal in a very quick amount of time if we respond directly to nature and if we have earth-based solutions. The energy is good, but let's also touch the ground. That is the issue. We have gone away from our mission to be co-creators with God of an abundant, fruitful earth. And, we have to redeem that. We have to confess. We have to return and come back to our senses. When we show that we come back to our senses, Mother Nature is like, oh, they're home, yay! She will just, be ecstatic, and we've seen that. I've seen that in my own restoration efforts on lawns and in very degraded areas. The first year, you start to see a change, and within 4 years, that change is stabilized. And so that's the image I think we ought to have in our minds, is not how bad we have been and how awful it will be, is let's just change. Let's just stop, turn around, do the right thing, and have that image of, in 4 years, we can have a whole new stabilized economy based on redeemed ecosystems.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. As a matter of fact, just thinking about what you were saying about how we can change our communities. I'm thinking about on Wednesdays, I generally work at the Brownsville Food Forest. The Brownsville Food Forest is a development that is aimed at addressing food, the food deprivation, the food desert, if you will. And I know people don't like using that phrase, food desert, but that part of Atlanta, which is probably a good 60 to 70% of the Atlanta area, is indeed a food desert, and you can only get the population that resides in this area. But anyway, I'm bringing this up to talk about the change that I've seen in the soil, in the environment. There's certain parts of the forest that you can walk into because it's so green. The climate in that part of the forest. We're only talking about 7.5 acres. So there's certain parts of the forest that I can walk into where the climate is completely different. And it's because the area is so green, it's so rich. The soil is different, the air is different, and so it just gives even more credibility to what Reverend Revdele is saying about how we can change our local area. We don't necessarily have to wait on the new presidential administration, but there are things that we can do in our own community to improve the quality of our environment. Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure I said that. Anybody have anything to add? Well, that's fine, because we also I wanted us to talk about a recent article from the Independent where scientists say that it would take decades for the Earth's climate to reach a new equilibrium. Dr. Carr, I think you spoke about that earlier at the beginning, and I do apologize. I got a little ahead of myself and didn't get a chance to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself properly. But I know you said something about that earlier. The amount of time that it's going to take if we don't do something different and reverse what we're doing, especially in the area of fossil fuels. That it's going to take a long time for us to recover. But this article in the Independent indicates that it would take many decades for the Earth's climate to reach a new equilibrium. Is there still time, and in your opinion, ladies, is there still time to reverse these unprecedented levels of rising sea levels, extreme natural disasters like the fires that we have, and the destruction of habitat? Do we still have time? And if there is still time, what role should our new administration, what role would they need to take in order for the U.S. to combat this crisis that we have? Anybody?
I have something I'd like to share from the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, and I'd like to just share some excerpts from an article. It says, in 1992, the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development acknowledged that the role of indigenous tribes was crucial to changing our climate. And then in 2019, they produced a report, and they found that while millions of species face extinction, this decline in biodiversity is less pronounced on indigenous peoples' lands, indicating that these communities are more effectively managing natural resources as well as species decline and pollution. Earlier studies have come to similar conclusions, highlighting the need to partner with indigenous groups and arguing that granting them legal ownership of their native lands is an obvious solution to mitigate climate change and successfully conserve rainforests. The majority of legal advancements for indigenous peoples have focused on protecting their culture, dismissing the fact that their native lands and their interaction with the native lands form an integral part of cultural identity. In that sense, indigenous rights are essentially active conservation measures, and an expansion of cooperation between countries and native groups is therefore low-hanging fruit that could revolutionize the way climate and environmental policy is made. And so putting the power back into the hands of indigenous nations is a critical part of an accelerated, climate change, climate policy.
Mhm. And as a matter of fact, I believe this week there is a rally going on in Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
I believe it was today or yesterday, where they spoke about the impacts, the climate impacts on the indigenous people, and how and the role that the indigenous play or can play in advocating for changes in our environment and changes in our climate. And so,
But they have to have the right to live according to their traditional cultural practices. And that's the key point, is the way the reservations are set up and all of the policies that support that prevent the traditional cultural practices from being in effect. And
right.
so that's the issue, is that we all need to change our cultural relationship with the land and how we interact. And if we would allow the indigenous peoples, I think, they're only 5% of the population, but they manage 80% of the environment that is in a healthy and productive state. And so if we can increase that, I think we'll see a change, because that change happens immediately. I think that's what this article is saying, is that we already see a difference between the way indigenous nations manage the land and the way European nations manage land. And there's already a change. There's already a positive impact. And so why can't we just promote the positive, put more resources into restoring, cultural practices, and we will start to see that we can turn this around. If we keep doing the same thing, if we keep digging the hole that we're in right now, yes, of course, we're going to have problems. Yes, of course, it will take longer. So it depends on the solutions that you put on the table.
Right.
That's what determines how long it will take. And right now, we don't have the best solutions being financed. I think and there's something in our head. We're not getting that.
Well, the indigenous people, as you said, live close to Earth. Their ethics are completely different, whereas the non-indigenous people believe in overdevelopment of the land. They see a tract of trees, an area of, a forest. They think, how can they convert that into money, quick money? And so they cut down the trees, they sell the timber, and then they use the land for putting townhomes and hospitals and shopping malls. So it's a totally different way of thinking. And the big question that we are all struggling with, and in our own neighborhoods, is how do you fight that mentality of overdevelopment? I mean, I have that in my own neighborhood in Atlanta.
Right.
I'm surrounded by new hospitals, new townhomes, new hotels. Mm-hmm. Every day I see they cut down another 1,000 trees. It was a very green area, but now it's a desert. It's becoming a desert. Just buildings all around me. So this is what we are struggling with, but I don't know how to change the ethic from what we see to the indigenous way, where development is not what they do. They don't build on their land like the rest of the country does, or the rest of the world does. And you're very right. If we could adopt some of that ethic, we'll be in much better shape. We are
I think what's funny is that even with this whole shopping mall phenomena, we know from experience that in 10 years, that shopping center is going to die and it
Yes,
will be left vacant. And it
yes,
will be another huge slab of concrete that cannot give life to anything or anyone. So if we're not following logic right now, I'm
Right.
not sure that logic can save us.
yeah,
I think that's why we really have to look at, what's the spiritual issue? What is the spiritual malaise that makes people so disconnected from nature that they feel they can act like this?
yeah,
There's something not human about that because there's something destructive. And so we really have to sometimes dig beneath the surface and, go beyond the governmental policies, because that's assuming that you have sane people in charge and that you have people who respect humanity in charge. Well, if that's not true, the policies are not going to make a difference. I listened to a talk the other day, and she was saying it's nice to have elections and to have new people in office, but if life is not at the center of those policies, it doesn't matter. You can have a change in people in office and still have the same policies, and we're still going down the tube. And so we do have to make a fundamental change in each one of us, in our spiritual nature and in our daily relationship with nature. We need to reestablish that connection, because if nature is our mother, why is it okay to abuse and degrade your mother?
yes.
You know,
How
if
so?
if this is our life support system, why is it okay to tear it up?
Right. It's not okay. It's not okay. Kira,
Yeah.
what do you say?
My idea of a good future is to not destroy necessarily. It is definitely to create and to build and to develop technology, but while staying in balance with nature at the same time. We may have separate areas for nature for people to see, and the areas that aren't as useful for nature, we just develop new stuff on. But here's the thing, we also have to keep in balance with nature so that there's enough oxygen in the world, so that Earth still feels like Earth, while also developing technology and advancing our society. I definitely think we can learn from the indigenous people that way, yet we could have a balance between the two ideologies.
Mhm. That is
Balance is definitely the key. That is the key. That's the wisdom. That's the way we have to have balance. Absolutely.
and we have to look at it, that you're absolutely right, Kira. We have to examine the ideologies that are at work here. In other shows on this platform, I've talked about the idea of America's moral compass being called into play. That and how the pandemic and how this presidential election in particular has 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 opened the eyes and called people to a level of consciousness about the ideologies that are at work in our culture today. And so, if we think about some of in Revdele, you talk about the relationship that we have with the earth and our land and our environment. We're being called to the carpet. The earth has given us a lot of signals that we should change, and as the Bible says, turn from those wicked ways and humble ourselves to what has been given to us and entrusted to us to be good stewards over. And so there's a lot of different perspectives on how we can go about doing that. And there are a lot of different, as you say, Kira, a lot of different ideologies at work that have put us in this position. And some of those ideologies are going to have to be jettisoned in order to pull us out of this situation. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to mention one of the reasons why I keep talking about the relationship with nature is because that will pull us out of this fight or flight dynamic.
Right.
Everything we're either fighting something or we're running away from something. And you have at the base of that a spirit of fear.
That's
And
right.
we know that love, doesn't operate in that space. It says perfect love casts out all fear. And so if we can restore even our language, we're always fighting this and fighting that. How about let's birth something? How about let's create? Let's develop, let's redeem, let's restore. Let's use some different verbs, because whatever we speak, we give power to. And so if we're always fighting, that means we're giving power to fighting. That means we're giving power to anger and hatred and things that are not compatible with life on earth.
That is
And
so
so
true.
I would like us to look at our language and have our language be more creation oriented, because again, what we speak, we give power to. I
Absolutely.
think you see the impact of our language is playing out on our environmentalists. Our activists are in despair, they are depressed, they are tired, and everyone's, oh, self-care, self-care, self-care. Do you know that if you cared for the earth every day, your self-care would be automatically included? You would not have to spend extra time, you would not have to spend extra money caring for yourself if you cared for nature every day. You would not have despair, because you would see the overwhelming power of abundance. You would see the massive yields that come from doing the right thing. And you say, oh my God, this is easy. Yes, it is.
Yes,
And so, and so I just have to, I have to put that plug in there. Yes, I get evangelical. That's okay.
that's okay. That's all right.
Faith has to be a part of this,
It,
because we have to call things into being that we don't see. And right now, we don't see love, we don't see grace, we don't see balance. And so we have to call that into being. And those words need to be part of our policy. That's why I really like the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Mother Nature, because it uses that redemptive language in a constitutional document. And that constitutional document has been used by countries, it's been used by states to stop fracking. It's been used in California successfully, in Pennsylvania successfully, and I think even in Florida, to protect rivers as well as to protect, mountains and pieces of land. And so I think looking at our language is important, and making sure that our language in our policies is redeeming and has life values at the core of it. And
well,
we have some models out here. It's not like we have to start from scratch.
well, I believe also that in the coming years, as a culture, we will definitely see some of that language incorporated into the overall dialogue. Now, as we close, as we get ready to close, from each of you, I'd love to hear your perspective on if on what can we do as individuals, what can we do in our own localities um, to spread the word, create awareness, and make a change. Reverend Dele, I think we pretty much know your position on it. I'd love I love to hear from Dr. Core and Keira. You guys, talk about what can people do in their own locality to advocate for this climate crisis.
I think the most important thing we can do is plant trees, which we can do by ourselves or with the help of certain organizations like Trees Atlanta. There are other organizations that would plant trees for you. And we need to plant trees because they serve as carbon dioxide sinks, which will help alleviate global warming. They generate oxygen, which we need for breathing. They hold the soil together, and thus preventing mudslides and erosion. And they clean water by filtration. And so a single tree can yield a very large value to us, and almost to the extent of $100,000 in all these services that a single tree can provide. So that's one thing. And in addition to that, we can use new technologies that are now available to us, such as installing solar panels on our roofs if we own our homes,
That's
or
right.
buying hybrid cars, or electric cars. And from my own experience, I can say that a hybrid car gives you very high mileage per gallon to the extent of 60 mpg, and they're not more expensive than regular gasoline cars. So I think we need to educate everyone about trading in the gasoline cars and buying hybrids or electric cars. Now, electric cars are way more expensive right now, and not all of us can afford them, but I think hybrids are.
Yeah.
And hybrids are really same price as gas-driven cars. So these are a couple of things that I want to mention. I'll let others speak.
No, go ahead. Yeah. Keira,
Oh, no, I'm good.
you okay?
I think another thing that I would like to add is that we all need to become activists. We all need to approach our local representatives and try to push the climate agenda, and in whichever way, by talking to them about being more connected with nature. I think that is really the best thing. But also writing policies that are climate friendly. If we don't take action, our new administration will not be able to get anything done, because they need the political support from the grassroots organizations, like the churches, like all these youth-driven organizations. They need to hear from them so that they can push their agenda through the Senate, through the Congress. So we can all do a lot at our own level, although each one of us individually feels, what can I do? But I think we can do a lot.
Right. And if you are not politically charged and or you don't have the time, you can do something just as simple as separating your newspapers from your plastic and recycling. Or
Absolutely. Yes.
if you're still drinking from aluminum cans, like how I like to drink just canned waters, sparkling water. You can also recycle your aluminum can and take those to the recycling bins. There are lots of simple things that you can do to advocate for cleaning up the environment. And another thing too that I see a lot of, sometimes I see a lot of trash in the river, but one thing I tell myself, I'm in the car or wherever I am, before I toss a piece of trash out of the window, I tell myself, wherever you're going, there is bound to be a trash can. And so there's never a need to discard trash in the river, in the sewer, in these different types of systems that will impact our infrastructure. We can always take something to the trash. And then a lot of places have places where you can separate the paper, the aluminum, the glass. There are things, just very simple things that individuals can do to contribute to the cause of our climate.
These are great points.
Yeah, very simple things. And on that note, we're going to go ahead and close out. I want to give a special thanks to everybody that appeared tonight. Your perspective, as usual, is invaluable. Of course, you are invited to resume our next conversation on climate in January 2021. I'm sure that there are going to be a host of things for us to talk about by the time the third week of January. In fact, I believe this particular show will be the week of the inauguration. So by then, we would have witnessed a transition between the presidential cabinets, and we'll see how smooth that goes, and we'll see what the status of climate change will be by then. So until next time, I want to thank you all for listening. I want to give a special thanks to Keystone Public Radio, and also I leave you with these famous words by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, that whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly. I want to say thank you and good night, and come back on next Thursday. Where we will not have a show on next Thursday because next Thursday will be Thanksgiving. I bid all of you be safe for Thanksgiving, and wear your mask and be safe, and social distance and all of those things that will keep you healthy so that you will be around on the next Thanksgiving. So good night, everybody, and thank you for tuning in. Welcome to Perspectives On, where we're giving the world a voice. We are a faith-based social justice forum where individuals give their perspectives on various topics. It's an opportunity to express their viewpoint, their stance, and their angle on justice issues affecting the community and globally. Each episode features guests presenting their perspective on things like climate change, the church, urban farming, and food insecurity, all through a unique faith lens. Come check us out